Ma'am, this is a restricted travel item. Are you seriously telling me you're a Navy SEAL? The TSA agent's voice, thick with condescending disbelief, echoed in the sterile quiet of the security checkpoint. The crowd, a mix of weary travelers and uniformed military personnel, snickered nervously. They saw what the agents saw: a woman in her late 50s, her hair touched with gray, dressed in comfortable jeans and a worn, nondescript jacket. She was the picture of a traveling grandmother, not an elite warrior. She offered no reaction to the public insult, her face a mask of placid calm, her eyes fixed on the object in the agent's hand. Her silence was a stark contrast to his loud, performative authority. But as the agent puffed out his chest, preparing for another verbal volley, a Navy captain further back in the line felt a jolt of recognition. It wasn't the woman he recognized, but the small, impossibly rare pin fastened to her jacket collar, a tiny, four-star trident almost lost in the fabric. If you believe true competence needs no announcement, type respect below. The captain knew this encounter was about to change, and the agent, along with everyone watching, was about to learn a lesson in humility they would never forget. The scene was one of tired, institutional beige and fluorescent hum. The air smelled of floor cleaner and the faint, metallic scent of the X-ray machines. Agent Miller, a man whose authority was derived entirely from his uniform and not from any discernible wisdom, held up the item for all to see. It was a compact, matte black device, an advanced rebreather component that looked alien amongst the laptops and toiletry bags. "We see this all the time," Miller announced to the queue, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Weekend warriors, movie buffs. They buy some surplus gear online and suddenly think they're Rambo. Ma'am, impersonating a federal officer, especially a special operator, is a serious crime." The woman, whose name tag on her simple duffel read K. Morgan, said nothing. Her posture was relaxed, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She simply watched him, her gaze unwavering. This infuriated Miller even more. He wanted a reaction, a protest, an argument he could dismantle. Her professional calm was an insult to his manufactured drama. "I'm going to have to detain you and have Port Authority police sort this out," he declared, reaching for his radio. He was enjoying the spectacle, the feeling of power as he publicly dismantled this quiet woman's supposed lie. The onlookers shifted, their amusement turning into discomfort. They were witnessing a public shaming, and her profound stillness made them complicit in the agent's ignorant prejudice. As Miller began speaking into his radio, his other hand gestured dismissively with the rebreather component. In his clumsy, agitated movement, he inadvertently triggered a pressure release valve. A sharp hiss of compressed air shot out, and he flinched, dropping the device. It clattered onto the stainless steel counter, teetering on the edge. Before anyone could react, Morgan's hands moved. There was no haste, no panic, just a fluid, economical motion that was breathtaking in its precision. One hand caught the device an inch from the floor, the other simultaneously cupping the valve housing. Her fingers, steady and sure, performed a sequence of 3 distinct, practiced movements: a slight twist, a firm press, then a gentle pull on a nearly invisible reset pin. The hissing stopped. She then placed the now inert device back in the center of the counter, her hands retreating to their resting position as if they had never moved at all. A wave of absolute, deafening silence washed over the checkpoint. The nervous laughter was gone, replaced by a collective, unspoken awe. In that single, 5-second act of quiet competence, she had demonstrated a level of familiarity with the sensitive equipment that no weekend warrior could ever fake. Her action was the perfect, unspoken refutation of his every word. The color drained from Agent Miller's face, his arrogance instantly shattered and replaced by a flash of panic confusion. The proof was undeniable, yet his ego refused to accept it. That's not possible," he stammered, his voice now a weak whisper. The crowd stared, no longer at him, but at the woman. They saw her differently now. Her calm was no longer passivity. It was control. Her silence was not weakness, it was discipline. But Miller, trapped by his own public declarations, made a fatal choice. He doubled down. "It's a trick," he blurted out, his voice regaining a desperate, brittle strength. "She's practiced that. These fakes, they're getting better. They study videos." He turned to his approaching supervisor, a weary-looking man named Henderson. "Sir, I have a stolen valor situation here. This woman is impersonating a SEAL. She's carrying restricted equipment, and she's non-compliant." Henderson looked from his flustered agent to the placid woman and the device on the counter. He sighed, sensing the impending bureaucratic nightmare. It was at that precise moment, as Henderson opened his mouth to begin the official process of detention, that another voice cut through the tension, a voice that carried the effortless weight of command, a voice that stopped everyone cold. "Agent Miller, stand down." The words were spoken calmly, yet they resonated with an authority that dwarfed the TSA agents. A tall man in a perfectly pressed Navy service uniform, with the 4 silver stripes of a captain on his shoulder boards, stepped out of the line. He moved with a purpose that parted the crowd. He didn't look at Miller or his supervisor. His attention was focused entirely on Morgan. "Ma'am," he began, his tone a universe of respect away from Miller's condescension. "Captain Hayes, United States Navy. Forgive this entire spectacle." He gestured with his chin toward her jacket. "I apologize for staring, but I haven't seen one of those since I was a lieutenant listening to Admiral Thornton debrief us on Operation Nightfall." He paused, his eyes fixed on the tiny, dark pin. "The resolution on the projection was poor, but I've never forgotten the design." He took a half-step closer, his posture one of genuine deference. "Ma'am, with your permission, may I have a closer look?" At the pin, his request was not a demand, but a plea, as if he were asking to view a sacred relic. The quiet professional, Kay Morgan, finally spoke. Her voice was low and clear. "Permission granted, Captain." Captain Hayes leaned in, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The pin was minuscule, designed to be overlooked. It was a blackened trident, intricately detailed, but wrapped around its base were 4 impossibly small platinum stars. The onlookers held their breath, sensing this was the heart of the mystery. Hayes stood up straight, a look of profound, almost reverent shock on his face. He turned not to Morgan, but to the TSA supervisor and the now ghostly white Agent Miller. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice low and intense. They shook their heads dumbly. "This," he said, his voice dropping further, making everyone lean in, "is the Neptune's Trident 4th star designation. It's not in any regulation. You can't earn it in a ceremony. It was created for one reason, to be the ultimate quiet professional's identifier. It was commissioned by the Chief of Naval Operations himself, to be given only to the single most critical operator on a Tier 1 mission, the one person whose silence and competence guaranteed the lives of everyone else." He let that sink in. There were only 3 ever made. The first was buried with Master Chief Thorne after he was lost in the Hindu Kush. The second is under glass at the Naval Academy Museum. In the Legends of the Deep exhibit, he turned his head slowly, his gaze finally landing on Morgan. He said nothing more, letting the deafening silence complete the sentence for him. The third pin was right here, in a TSA line, being worn by a grandmotherly figure who had just been accused of being a fake. In the aftermath of the captain's revelation, a profound stillness settled over the terminal. Agent Miller looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his mouth slightly agape, his face a mask of horrified realization. His supervisor, Henderson, was already stammering apologies, his words tumbling over one another in a frantic effort to undo the damage. Captain Hayes, however, simply raised a hand to silence him. He then turned to face Morgan, squared his shoulders, and executed the sharpest, most formal salute of his career. "Ma'am," he said, his voice ringing with absolute respect. "It is an honor. Thank you for your service." Morgan simply gave a short, almost imperceptible nod in return. The gesture was all the confirmation anyone needed. The captain then personally took her duffel bag, addressed the supervisor with a glacial stare, and said, "I am personally escorting Master Chief Morgan to her flight." I expect a full report of this incident on my desk by the time I land. The title, Master Chief, hung in the air, a final devastating blow to Miller's ignorant assumptions. The story of that moment spread through the airport like a shockwave. By the time Morgan's flight was boarding, every pilot, flight attendant, and military member in the terminal knew. They spoke in hushed, reverent tones about the TSA agent who tried to arrest a living legend, a ghost operator from the pages of classified history. Agent Miller was not fired. His fate was, in a way, more humbling. He was reassigned indefinitely to the oversized baggage claim in the airport's cavernous, echoing basement. His days of public gatekeeping were over. He now spent his shifts tagging golf bags and ski equipment in solitude. The quiet hum of the conveyor belt a constant reminder of the deafening silence that had followed his greatest professional failure. He was required to attend a series of mandatory retraining courses focused on de-escalation, cultural sensitivity, and, most pointedly, a class titled Recognizing Unseen Service. The lesson was brutal and effective. Weeks later, a group of young, boisterous Army Rangers came through his station, their uniforms crisp, their voices loud as they recounted tales of their recent training exercises. The old Miller would have puffed his chest out, eager to engage, to share his own limited military history and establish a pecking order. The new Miller, however, remained silent. He scanned their bags with quiet efficiency, his movements methodical. As he handed the last soldier his claim ticket, he looked him in the eye and said simply, "Thank you for your service. Have a safe flight." He had learned the profound and painful lesson that the loudest voices in the room are often the emptiest, and that true strength, the kind that changes the course of history, often travels in complete and total silence. Months later, the incident had become folklore, a cautionary tale whispered to new TSA recruits at the academy in Glencoe. It was known as the Morgan Rule, a simple but powerful directive. You do not judge a book by its cover, because that cover might be classified top secret. A grainy security photo of Captain Hayes saluting the unassuming woman was printed and pinned to the main bulletin board in the training hall, a permanent symbol of the day arrogance collided with legacy. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, the subject of the legend was doing what she had always done. In a dusty, sun-baked training facility, Master Chief Morgan stood behind a young operator, a woman half her age with fire in her eyes. The young SEAL was struggling with a complex demolition charge sequence, her frustration mounting. Morgan didn't speak. She simply placed her steady hands over the younger woman's, guiding them through the intricate process. Her touch was firm but gentle, her movements conveying the lesson more effectively than words ever could. She was teaching the next generation the same ethos she embodied: precision over praise, competence over commendation. Her legacy wasn't a viral story in an airport. It was the silent, steady transfer of skill, ensuring that the quiet professionalism she represented would continue long after her name was forgotten. True strength is not found in the volume of a voice, but in the steady competence of hands. It is not validated by the approval of a crowd, but by the quiet respect of those who understand the weight of real-world consequence. Agent Miller sought authority through a plastic badge and a loud voice. He believed respect was a resource to be demanded from others. Master Chief Morgan, however, possessed an authority that was earned in darkness and silence, on missions the world will never know about. Her respect was not something she ever asked for. It was a byproduct of her absolute mastery, a force of nature that emanated from her very presence. The world is full of loud assumptions and superficial judgments, but it is shaped and protected by the quiet professionals, the unassuming figures whose actions speak with a clarity that words can never achieve. Their legacy is not written in headlines, but etched into the very fabric of history, a silent testament to the enduring power of demonstrated excellence. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where professional silence defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.